welcome to the Life with Impact podcast. It is a podcast where we have conversations with experts and our presenters and people that have great. Sorry, let me just start again.
Yeah, I was just going to say you need to move a little bit closer because you're moving more now. I think it's the tired kicking in.
Yeah.
Me, I'm
I'll have there. Okay, cool. Okay, Luke, this is where you start. Sorry, false start. Okay. Welcome to the Life with Impact podcast. This is a podcast for our community where we can talk to people who are experts in their fields and just encourage, inspire, equip, and really grow together as people who want to be more like Jesus. And so this is part of the series, or today's conversation is part of the series Powerful Parenting, with me, Charlene Saker, and my guest, very special guest, Nicole Daniel. Nicole is a social worker and works a lot with children in the school space, private setting, does workshops, and also a mom. And so she's going to be continuing her just sharing with us and giving us tools as we navigate parenting. Now, we've been speaking about building connections with our children and emotions. That was actually part 2 and part 3. So you can actually go and look at all these episodes on the podcasts and also on YouTube. And you can go and just listen to some of the really great tools and conversations that we've had, because it's really actually sometimes just about knowing that you're not alone and that you're not going crazy. It is hard. You're not a bad parent. It's just that parenting is hard. And so we're going to talk a bit now in this 4th episode of the series. We're going to talk about parent wellness, which is something that I'm also very passionate about because I believe it's such an important component. So I think, Nicole, you can just explain to us what this week's topic is all about and what you mean by parent wellness.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm so excited. I have such a deep passion about parent wellness, especially being a mom myself and realizing that navigating parenthood can be a roller coaster, sometimes absolutely exciting, sometimes thrilling, and sometimes downright hard.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, there is a time where you get to get off that roller coaster and catch your breath. And so often we don't do that as parents. We feel like it's a never-ending loop where we just go to sleep exhausted, wake up actually exhausted still, and have to continue the same thing. Yeah. And for me, my heart is about building up parents and equipping them to understand that they are so worthy and good enough. Yeah. And I really believe that parents, irrespective of the journey that they're on and where they're at with their children, that they were chosen and set apart to be their child's parent. And so I really, as I say, I have such a passion for parents, understanding that they are worthy, they are good enough. And I mean, let's face it, as parents, I don't think we often feel that. We don't often feel like we've got this down to a T. I don't think we ever will. Yeah. But I think if we can just catch a glimpse of our own worth, not our worth in what we can do, but our worth in who God has created before us, and knowing that God gave us our children. Yes. And so we're never alone. And I think if we're able to just for a split second hold on to that and realize that we've got this. So I'm so excited about speaking about parent wellness today, and really, understanding that we've spoken about building meaningful relationships. We've spoken about navigating the sea of emotions. And we've also spoken last week about building emotional intelligence. But Charlene, at the end of the day, we can't have any of those things until we're okay. And so today I really want to touch on the fact that it is important that we are emotionally, physically, mentally okay. Irrespective of mental health conditions, irrespective of circumstances, but that we're okay.
Yeah. No, it's really good, and it reminds me of that thing that they say, as a parent, you put your oxygen mask on first, and that goes for every day. It's not, I think traditionally we've had this view maybe that our kids come first, and whatever's left I'll give to myself. But the honest truth is that there's almost never enough time left, never enough capacity or money left to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
It has to be an essential part of the puzzle to prioritize that. You actually just, I've just heard so much from people, even with work pressures and capacity. It's like, I'm going to try to take time off if I can, but it's like you can't do what you do if you do not rest. You cannot work if you do not have rest. You cannot be awake if you do not sleep. You need both to be able to function. Now, Nicole, maybe you can just talk to us a bit, because we spoke last week about being emotionally aware ourselves as parents, that it actually starts with us. It starts with us regulating ourselves and being an example to our kids. But maybe you can just explain to us just maybe a foundation for us as parents, how we can be aware of our emotion and what self-care, it's sometimes a word people don't really like, but what does it mean to be well and healthy as a parent?
Yeah, so I think, you spoke about it, or you mentioned it just now, about understanding our own emotional space. Because, life is so demanding. It is so, so deeply demanding. And the expectations are out there, and they're constantly in our face, whether it is through our own inner self-talk, whether it is through our family or friends, whether it is through social media. We are constantly being bombarded with what we need to do as parents, how we should behave. I feel like there's always a new parenting technique that's popping up, and it gets so overwhelming to know, okay, but what must I actually do? And I think if we can just get to a space where we not necessarily delve into our childhoods, there's always room for that, of course. But I think if we can just give our upbringing, our space, the space that we had growing up, and it's not to say that it is good or bad. I don't believe in good or bad, but whether there are healthy elements and unhealthy elements to it, and where we can learn from it. If we can just acknowledge the space that we had and acknowledge this influence that it has on us, because parenting is shaped, I believe, largely with how we were parented.
100%.
And it's not that it was wrong. It's not that it was, so terrible that we need to make this drastic shift. But I believe there's always room for improvement. No matter how much you learn, no matter how great a parent you are, there is always something we can do to navigate things a little bit smoother. And so I think if we can just start by acknowledging the space we're in. If we've had a tough day at work, sometimes we need 5 minutes before I can connect.
Yes.
And so, being honest and open and communicating that to our family, communicating that to our children, because we really actually want to model that. We want to show our children that if you have a tough day, that's okay. Take 5 minutes. Life's going to carry on whether you are pausing or not. So let's rather pause and be actually more present and engaged with ourselves and with our kids. And really just understanding what our expectations are of ourselves. Because sometimes we need to reflect on whether that's realistic or not. Even with myself, having worked, in the profession and understanding parenthood and that, the pressure that a person puts on themselves as a parent is tough. Sometimes we are our worst critics. And so I think if we can just pause and understand, what our expectations are of ourselves, what are our expectations of our kids? Because we cannot always expect our kids to thrive and to be on top form all the time. Because we can't even do that as adults. It is exhausting to keep up. And so sometimes we have to just slow down and realize that one thing at a time, one step at a time. And understanding that we have so many different roles. And that took me a long time to realize that, I'm not just a social worker, I'm a mom. And when I'm a mom, I can't be a social worker. When I'm a wife, I need to be there in that role. And really just giving grace for sometimes we're going to slip up. That's okay. We cannot have everything together. We can't. And so I mentioned in one of the previous episodes that we're going to fall, whether we like it or not. We're going to fail. We might as well just put it on the table and just, accept it while it's there. But how we rise, it makes a world of difference. So I say let's start with ourselves. And, I was saying to you earlier as well, there's such a negative perception, I think, especially from a Christian perspective about self-care, that self-care is selfish. But we cannot pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
And so if we are not necessarily like got everything together, but we are fulfilling ourselves one step at a time, the hope and the goal is that our kids are going to reap the benefits of the overflow and not just get the drips and drabs.
Yeah.
Because we go to bed and that's what we're giving ourselves.
Yeah.
We're exhausted. I don't know about you, but I go to bed sometimes where I think, what actually happened in the day? Like, oh my word, it's actually the end of the day and I have to get in bed and sleep and switch off for the next round.
Yeah.
And we have to be able to say that some days we're going to have days like that. But if we can strive towards not having every day like that, then that's great. That's a good accomplishment.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that we are aware of how we compare ourselves to other moms. And I know you'll get into the practical in a moment, or just some things to consider. But I find that we as moms, but for me in particular, like I spend a lot of time thinking of the ideal mom, the ideal parent I would like to be. And so I'm living up to something that is not even one in my capacity, but it's not even my personality. I always thought when the kids were little, I'm going to do sensory activities with the kids, and I'm going to, allow messy play. And even now, I think I would love to go and exercise with my kids, but my health limits me in a lot of ways. And so part of this is actually just almost accepting who you are as a parent, or what your limitations or your abilities are. But we cannot have it all. It isn't, here's the checklist of what makes a good parent and you have to tick all the boxes. Yeah. It's like you can select 10 of these.
If you're lucky.
Yeah, maybe 10 is a bit generous. You can select 5 of these areas to be good in. That's kind of sometimes what I think about, because we see it as we need to be a perfect parent.
Yes.
And so the ways that we could get it wrong is such a long list, where it's actually, we should turn it the other way around.
Absolutely.
The only way we could fail perhaps is if we just didn't show up at all.
Yes.
And so, but I'm going to let you just maybe explain to us or maybe get into the practical. How can we take care of ourselves? What are some of the things that we could focus on?
Yeah, so I think, at the end of the day, we need to be able to be aware of ourselves. We need to be aware of our own space. Like I was saying, if we understand what our journey has been up until now, and I also want to say, just to pause for a moment here, it doesn't matter how old your child is, because I feel like there's always time for connection and there's always room for improvement. They do say that as children get older, it just becomes a little bit more difficult. But nothing is impossible. I don't believe that things are impossible. We can always try and find a way to work things out and work to navigate things. But we need to want to do that. And so being absolutely oblivious to our own stories and our own space and only focusing on how I want to be, it's sometimes can just be self-defeating. Then it doesn't really help. So I think the first thing that we can do in terms of making it practical is giving recognition for the space that we're in. Giving recognition that some days are tough. Some days we don't have it all together. Some days we fail. Some days suck.
Yeah.
I even have those days. I have those days where and I was talking to you earlier about it, where I'm working so much, and then I have my 5-year-old say to me, Mom, can you finish all your work at work today so that, we can come home and play? And I have a choice in that moment. I have a choice to take absolute offense to that. Like, girl, do you even understand like what I'm trying to do? Working full-time, running my company. Do you even understand? I can choose to feel offended by this, or I can say, actually, and that's the value of pause. Actually, there's merit to what you're saying. Let me see how I can navigate this smoother, and being intentional about it.
Yeah.
But we have to be aware of our own space and our own limitations, because we all live very different lives. We all have different stories. But being aware of it makes such a difference. It's not about wallowing in how terrible things were or how tough things were.
Mm.
It's about that sucked. Our brains go, oh, okay, we're not dismissing our emotions. We're acknowledging that something wasn't, optimal. And now we can process it.
Yeah. One of my favorite scriptures as a parent has become Lamentations, where it says, great is your faithfulness. His mercies are new every morning. And it's become so real to me as a parent because, and I say this to my kids actually as well, today may have sucked, we may have not gotten along, but when we wake up, that's what's so amazing is that God gives us a brand new day every morning and we can try again. And
Exactly.
so holding on to past failures as well as a parent can actually hold you back from trying again. You feel like, well, I'm a failure, so what's the point? And then we get stuck in this negative cycle. So sometimes it's actually just saying today's a new day. I'm going to do the best with the day that I have or with what I can today.
And knowing that it's not the end of the world, so having grace for yourself and room for it's okay. And it is those moments don't have to define everything. When Olivia was born, I put unbelievable amount of pressure on myself to form attachment because, that's my career. I should know how to do this. And I felt like I did absolutely everything. And it was exhausting. I felt like nothing I did was enough. I was permanently exhausted. But realizing actually building that attachment, building that relationship is lifelong. But I had to go through my own journey of realizing the spaces that I'm in, the impact that it had, and giving space for that.
Yeah.
My daughter's a very strong-willed little girl, and I absolutely love that because as much as it can be very interesting to parent someone that is a miniature version of myself, times 10, but realizing that, hang on, this is how you were made, and this is what I needed, this is what I need now. How can I help you? But also understanding that you are your own person, that this is how we can navigate life together. But we have to understand our space. And so being real is so important because so often, we feel like we need to fake it to make it or hide it from our kids. We cannot say sorry to our kids. No, actually, I want to teach my child that if you mess up, you better own up to it.
Yeah.
The only way I can do that is if I model that. So
100%.
being real, that sometimes I'm exhausted. Sometimes I can't necessarily play that. And, it sounds, I think we spoke about it from the beginning, that I am a very real person and I'm very honest. Like what you see is what you get. I mean, there were times when I was playing with Olivia in the playroom because I was so adamant that we were going to have quality time, set my timer so that I'm not thinking of anything else, and I'd fall asleep in the playroom. I mean, that's the space that happens. But then, I'm sorry, like I'm just really tired.
Yeah.
But it's okay. Tomorrow we're going to try again. Or having a do-over. We had, a tough interaction and we're all just feelings in our house.
Yeah.
And then we go catching our breaths and then we go, okay, let's have a do-over.
Yeah. And I like when you say this, I just think, and this is probably a little tangent that I'm not going to go too long into, but we, in our modern culture, we live very isolated lives. And I remember hearing someone say that, many years ago, children were actually raised by communities. So children would go out and play the whole afternoon and be by the neighbors. But as time has gone on, we live in a world where we, as parents, have to do way more for our children.
Yes.
And we feel like we have to do and be everything for our children. And it's been such a journey for me because I felt like my kids are going to feel abandoned if I'm not always there for them.
Yeah.
But what that resulted in was actually a bit of a sense of entitlement in them. They've got access to my time 24/7. But that's not teaching them how to respect someone else's boundaries either. And so that is just something to consider as a parent as well. Maybe we go to the other extreme where we give them everything of ourselves, all our time, but they're not actually learning how to say, hey, sometimes the world doesn't revolve around what I want right now. Sometimes I need to actually just give mom space, and you're teaching them also how to take care of themselves. Like you said earlier, I'm going to take 15 minutes in the room. Obviously, you can't do that if you have babies and toddlers. There'll have to be other ways that you do that. But it is actually okay to put that boundary in place to say, hey, like this is something that I need, and you'll be okay. Like you can actually play by yourself for a little bit as well. But that is, like I said, a tangent, but you can continue.
That's a very exciting topic.
Yeah, there is a lot to talk about because it is also so, like we say, it's nuanced, it's complex, it's not the same every day. You can't copy paste every day, and this is the structure. Some weeks are busier. Sometimes you have to say to our kids, I have a deadline this week, and this week's going to be a bit of a tough one, but we're going to get through it together.
Yes.
You know, so we have to also just understand that life does come in waves, but maybe you can just continue talking about this.
But I think even to touch on that, I think, being aware of that. Because if we understand that some days are going to be more taxing, we need to be very aware that their behavior might show up differently. So I know already as well with Olivia, if she's starting to, be quite resistant and just dysregulated, sometimes in that moment it feels like the world is ending. I don't know what did I miss? And sometimes we actually just need to pause, step back and go, oh, I haven't spent time with her for a few days. So this, but really we need to then be aware. Yeah. One of the other things that I feel quite passionately about is stress and understanding and managing stress. Stress is really just our brain's way of coping with the demand. And if we don't have sufficient resources to meet those demands, we end up feeling stressed, experiencing a stress response. And so it's so important to be self-aware, not absorbed in your own space so much that you lose sight of the people in front of you, but just catching glimpses of the space you're in, understanding that sometimes it is taxing. And, I'd love for us to go into it in more details, but I think if we can practice those things that we spoke about in terms of emotional regulation, practicing those things gives us the ability to navigate our stress a bit better and counting on those resources. And it is, even if you don't have immediate family or you don't have relationships with your families, I think just being able to know who you can contact, who you can reach out to say, today has been a really tough day, or this has been a tough experience with my child, or a tough experience for myself. You need to have the resources in place because we cannot function in isolation. We need to have those people with whom we share a relationship with whom we can have contact with. Whether it is someone personal or an outside person like a professional, sometimes we need a somebody. And so that brings me to my third area of caring for yourself as a parent is those connections. And I think if we can just really take a moment to reflect on who are our resources. Is it going to church? Is it a mommy's group? Is it a dad's support group? Is it, just friends that you've got? Is it other fellow parents at a school? Is it maybe the teachers at school? Really just taking a moment to think about who are the people that you can count on, who you can connect with in time of need. And I think, we are in such a fortunate position coming from a Christian perspective, because we have, I feel like, that one hurrah moment where when all else fails and we can't phone a friend straight away, we can talk to God no matter, because he's always with us. And so I think from a Christian perspective, and it doesn't matter where your journey is in terms of Christianity, we are naturally created to seek out a higher power. There's theories done on it. So if we are able to take that moment where we can connect with God, understanding that he is the perfect parent. So when we are so flawed, he's covered all of that already. And we can say, okay, God, I don't know. Now I don't know what to do. I've done all of these things. What more can I do? How can I be the parent that I need to be? How can I support my children better? Help me to be the parent that my child deserves, and help me to have grace for myself, knowing that I don't have to have it all together, that sometimes, even in our messiness, our children still feel like we are the best things that have ever been created.
Yeah, I mean, you'll find your child's standards probably a lot lower than yours. But
By far.
yeah, no, definitely. They just, yeah, they actually don't care. And I think that's the other thing I wanted to say is they don't care about what the house looks like. I know we speak about this all the time, but they don't care that they're having fish or like fish fingers and chips again for supper.
Yes.
They'll probably be even happier.
Yes.
I've started to kind of try to. I know that Tuesdays are busy days for me, so Tuesdays is my frozen schnitzel and
Yes.
oven chip nights. Like I don't
Yep.
even try to be a hero that day. I'm gonna schedule in and create margin because I know on that day I'm not going to make a home cooked meal.
Yes.
I've also tried to start cooking enough one night and we eat the same thing 2 nights in a row, normally bolognese, because I know my kids will be able to do that 2 days in a row.
Yes.
And I don't feel bad about that anymore. We have to find creative ways to create margin in our lives because honestly it's sometimes an unrealistic expectation we have of ourselves. Like you said, we have to really question, where is this coming from? Why is this so important to me? Does it matter? Does it really matter? Because sometimes it actually doesn't. Sometimes in the greater scheme of things, it doesn't matter right now. But, you know, even sometimes we have this idea that when you get home, we need to first get everything in place. But for me, I'm like, I know I need a half an hour to lie down on the bed just to reset because I know there's still a few hours ahead of making supper and homework and all of that. And that really helps me. Sometimes it's just about giving ourselves permission to take those moments for ourselves and reframing it. It's not a bad thing. We're not doing anything wrong. And teaching our children that this is what it means to take care of ourselves, because my body is a temple and I'm asked by God to steward this body that I've been given.
And I really think that, that comes down to worth. If we believe that we were created worthy and loved and cared for, it gives us that room to, okay, I actually deserve a little bit of TLC. It's okay. And then we carry on. It's not that we get stuck in that space. If we're getting stuck in that space, whole different thing, then we need to reach out for extra help. But it's okay. You're dead right with that one. We need to just know ourselves and say it's okay. It's okay. Not okay to, spend 2 hours on the screen and then ignore my child and close the door, because we see that as well. But that it's okay. We're good enough. We are worthy and deserving of a little bit of time and TLC.
Yeah. And if you're not sure how to measure how much time you need, maybe ask a friend that's close to you, hey, in what ways do you think I might be struggling? Maybe they have a different perspective. Maybe they think, like, you are doing way too much with your kids' lunch boxes. They do not need sandwiches cut it into fancy shapes. Like, they will be fine with the crusts on. I'm making a silly example, but
it's true.
But maybe you're overdoing it in some areas. I remember when my children were in preschool, I remember once going to put their bag in their little block, and then I saw another parent's lunch boxes. It was a sandwich and an apple, and I thought, why haven't I been doing that all along?
Yeah, like why are we overcomplicating it?
Why am I going through so much effort?
Yes.
Why am I baking homemade muffins and all these things? Not that those things are bad, and if you can, go for it. But I just realized in that moment, oh my word, I'm overcomplicating my life for myself.
Yes.
So go and talk to someone and bounce it off someone else. Maybe there's some things that you are making harder than it needs to be because you have a perception of what it looks like to be a perfect mom or parent. And so maybe there's a bit of freedom for you in just cutting back on some things that are not as important.
Yes.
Maybe you need to say no to family sometimes. I watched a video once where the lady said she knows that the way that she can show up for her children is by saying no to a lot of things, by cutting down on other commitments while her children are young, and that is okay.
Yeah.
You don't have to be at everything, do everything. If you are raising young kids, this is a season of your life where you need to be present.
Yes.
And you need time and margin.
Yes.
For that. Nicole, any last thoughts before we say goodbye for today?
Yeah, I think it's just to have grace. Have grace and know that you don't need to be a perfect parent. And sometimes social media is and your own thoughts is your worst enemy.
Mm.
But you're doing a good enough job, and good enough is okay.
Yeah.
And we don't have to have it right all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a good point. Social media, go unfollow accounts on Instagram of women that make you feel bad about how you're parenting. Go do that now. That will be a challenge for today. Go unfollow 3 accounts.
Yes.
Because sometimes and we're not even conscious of what's happening. It's slowly building this belief in our minds that, because you think, oh wow, I love that idea and I love what she's doing. It's so subtle. But what your brain is building is this idea that in order to be a good mom, I need to be doing this.
Yeah, and I think that's where it comes down to discernment. If we say it's the same as when you are pregnant, so many people are going to give you so much information, and that's okay. But decide, what are you going to hold close to your heart from that information, and what are you not going to use?
Yeah, so good. Thank you, Nicole. We're going to be back next week with the next episode of Powerful Parenting.
Thank you so much.
You can go look at previous episodes on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, on our podcast and websites. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you so much, Charlene.